Middleham. This tiny English market town lies in Wensleydale, in the Yorkshire Dales. On the edge of the town sits the magnificent Middleham Castle, once home to Richard III himself, but more of that later. Little is known about the early construction of Middleham Castle, but it is thought that the castle keep began construction in the 1170s at the behest of one Robert Fitz-Ranulph, who inherited lands granted to his grandfather by William the Conqueror in around 1069. The keep at Middleham is one of the biggest hall keeps in the country. It provided the main living quarters of the castle. The first written record of the castle is in 1216, at the end of the reign of King John. By this time, the castle was in the hands of Robert's son, Ranulph Fitzrobert. It was through Ranulph's granddaughter, Mary, Lady of Middleham, that we see the castle pass to the famed Neville family. Mary Fitz-Ranulph married one Robert Neville, and subsequently gave birth to their son, Ranulph Neville, later to become 3rd Baron Neville. Upon his father's untimely death, Ranulph became heir apparent to his grandfather's estate, which included Middleham Castle. It was likely Ranulph who arranged the construction of the curtain wall around the keep of the castle. Ranulph's first son Robert, who was known as the Peacock of the North, due to his heraldry, was unfortunately killed by the Scots in 1319. So it was his second son Ralph who inherited the castle, along with the title 4th Baron Neville. Ralph worked for the crown as a soldier and administrator under the reign of Edward III. He was one of the leaders who commanded Edward's army in its defeat of the Scots at the Battle of Neville's Cross. Ralph's son John fought beside him at the battle. John Neville became an important and wealthy man, engaging in many significant building projects, including the fortification of nearby castles at Raby and Sheriff Hutton. It is therefore unlikely that he had much time to do work on Middleham Castle. John's eldest son, Ralph, was made Earl of Westmoreland and became one of the richest and most influential forces in the north of England. In 1388, he was granted a weekly market at Middleham, as well as an annual fair to be held in the middle of the town. Improvements at the castle at this time, including better lodgings and latrines, were undoubtedly down to Ralph. King Henry IV's visit in 1410 indicates that these improvements were deemed fit for a king and his entourage. Upon his death in 1425, Middleham Castle, as well as Raby and Sheriff Hutton, passed to his eldest son Richard. It was during Richard Neville's tenure at Middleham Castle that the first battle of the War of the Roses occurred at St Albans. Richard joined the Yorkist rebellion and met a gruesome and untimely death at Pontefract Castle, where he was mob lynched and his head mounted on one of the gates of the city of York. His eldest son, also named Richard, became one of the greatest magnates of the 15th century, not least due to his marriage to Anne Beauchamp, daughter of the Earl of Warwick. Neville was one of the leaders in the War of the Roses, changing allegiance when it suited him. He was instrumental in the deposition of 2 kings, which led to his famed epithet of Kingmaker. One of Richard Neville's allegiances at this time was to Richard Plantagenet, 3rd Duke of York, and it was through his allegiance that the son of the Duke, future King Richard III, was to dwell at Middleham Castle. To weep is to make less the depth of grief. Tears then for babes, blows and revenge for me. William Shakespeare describes in his play Henry VI, Part 3, future King Richard's grief at hearing of his father's death at the Battle of Wakefield. Following his father's death, a young teenage Richard and his brother George were taken in by Richard Neville, now Earl of Warwick, and made their new home at Middleham. It was likely during this time that the future king met his future wife Anne Neville, daughter of his host. He remained in the Neville household until late 1468. In 1471, Richard Neville died at the Battle of Barnet, and soon after, in 1472, Richard, now Duke of Gloucester, married Anne Neville. This strengthened his status in the north. King Edward IV, Richard's brother, granted him the lands in the north, including Middleham Castle. It is thought that Richard's son, Edward, was born at the castle in 1473. Upon the death of King Edward IV, in April 1483, Richard became protector of the realm, and by July had been crowned king. He and his wife spent some time at Middleham as their base in the north, but his duties as monarch would have taken him all over the country. Slave, I have set my life upon a cast, and I will stand the hazard of the die. There be 6 Richmonds in the field, 5 I have slain today instead of him. A horse! A horse! My kingdom for a horse! Thus William Shakespeare wrote Richard III's last words before his death in August 1485 at the Battle of Bosworth. Following his death, Middleham Castle became the property of the Crown and remained so until 1604, when it was sold by James I to one Sir Henry Lindley. It was passed down to Henry's daughter, Jane, who married Edward Loftus. She and Edward were living at Middleham in 1642 when civil war broke out, and in 1647 Parliament ordered Middleham to be rendered useless to prevent the Royalists from taking it. However, during the 1650s, Middleham was garrisoned for Parliament, and in 1652 Edward Loftus, who backed the parliamentarian cause, petitioned for funds to fortify the castle at a cost of £1,500. After the restoration of Charles II, Middleham Castle was bought by the Wood family in around 1662. It remained in that family until 1882, when it was sold as a picturesque ruin to the inventor Samuel Cunliffe Lister for £70,000. In 1926, the Cunliffe Lister family placed the castle into the guardianship of the Office of Works. It has been in the care of English Heritage since 1984. Walking around these stately ruins, it is easy to absorb the many layers of almost 1,000 years of English history.